Okay, welcome to the next in our series of video interviews where I ask what's next post-COVID-19. So today, delighted to say with me, I have Danielle Harmer, who is the Chief People Officer at Aviva PLC. So hi, Danielle, how are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I know you're happy for me to call you Danny, which is much friendlier term. And if you could give us a little flavour about you, your role with Aviva, just so we can find out a little bit more for the audience.
Yeah, very happy to. So I joined Aviva as Chief People Officer in February this year. I had a month in the office before UK lockdown. And so I did actually get to see some real people for my first month at Aviva, and then we went into lockdown. So I mean, fascinating time to join an organisation. And in terms of my role, probably similar to other CHROs, CPOs, I look after everything to do with people and culture at Aviva, which is, it's a fascinating and fantastic job, and it's a brilliant organisation. So I'm blessed. I'm feeling blessed this Friday.
Yeah, I think there's been a number of HRDs and CPAs I've interviewed who, either have just joined a company before lockdown or actually on lockdown. So essentially not even spent any time in the office with any of their team. So they've been real remote onboarding, which is what the new way is forward, isn't it? Okay, all right. So let's brilliant. Let's kick off. And is it just numbers again? I was having a quick look. So 31,000 employees around about with Aviva.
We say 30,000. That's a good number, and it's about right.
And I think I read something about roots from about 300 years old company when the combined companies put together.
Over 320 years old. So various organisations, Norwich Union, Commercial Union, Friends Provident, lots of brands that will be familiar to people who are perhaps more our age than, they'll go, I recognise those brands. That is now part of the Aviva family. But, interestingly, I haven't been there that long, but people who are at Aviva talk about being part of Aviva. You don't sort of get, oh, well, I was Friends Provident. There's a very strong loyalty to the Aviva brand by our people.
Okay. All right. Well, let's kick off with question one then, which is, as I said, it's COVID-19 coming through the crisis, preparing for a better future. And so this really is kind of this looking back. So reflecting on the last 6 months, Danny, what are your key insights, I guess, and takeaways from what's gone on to date with obviously you and the organisation?
Yeah, I think there are a few. So the first is the getting everybody home. I think IT teams, so that the technology teams, the sort of business continuity teams, the internal comms teams, and HR function, of course I'm going to say that one, were the absolute heroes in organizations where the work could carry on, but it had to be done from home. So financial services like us, they are all the sort of questions that people have had. A lot of our teams are in contact centers, they talk to our customers on the phone. All the conversations that have happened in organizations about when can we move from desktops to laptops, and it would be quicker, and 2 weeks, everybody out. It kind of inspires you about what people can do when they're focused on one very simple and very important purpose. So I think that one first, I go big tick, and within that, how quickly organizations could move, how I hadn't been at Aviva very long, but certainly we got much better at saying, look, Danny, you for the sort of people agenda and our coup, you just need to make the decision on this and keep us. We can't have 15 people making a decision. We've got to operate day by day. So I think that was great. And the other thing is, what you watch is people don't just make decisions quickly, but I think their ability to see the right thing to do in a crisis is really dialed up. So we had people, because it's part of our business, we've got healthcare and protection. We have people who work for the business who are qualified medical professionals. And, we had a couple of them contact us and say, I used to work in the NHS, can I go back to the NHS? And now, you're looking at a global pandemic. You and I know the correct answer is yes, of course you can, and we'll work out how to do it. just yes, you know. So I think that ability to see the right thing to do to make sure people had the right kit at home, that people feel, you know, supported and that you're communicating with them was really important. And then once people were home, I think what's really come through is the importance of the role of the leader. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous because we all know your boss is really important, but actually when you're in an office surrounded by other people, there are lots of other support mechanisms around you. There's just the sort of general warmth and, you know, literally physically the organization is there for you, and there are other people and you have relationships and those sort of serendipitous moments in corridors, and or I'm having a bad day and someone clocks it and puts their arm around me. That doesn't exist in this environment. You have to go look for it. And really early on, what we, you know, dialed up was getting leaders to understand how key their role was for their people, because when you want 30,000 people to feel safe and still connected to the organization, the comms teams can write all the amazing emails and we can have, you know, we have sort of, it's uncut, which is effectively sort of Aviva live TV, but actually you need someone giving you clarity and trying to take away some of that ambiguity. So a lot of our time was focused on upskilling our leaders to lead remotely and just reiterating to them how important their role was, and just keep checking in with your people and supporting them. So I think those are probably some of my, you know, the key reflections looking back.
I think, and interestingly enough, you're in an industry of risk, aren't you? You know, ultimately, you know, so it's, and again, there's this, you know, everything that's come out through these interviews is very personal take on it by individuals. So your point on, you know, you're obviously in a business that's used to looking at risk in a different way, so I guess, and you're right, the empathy, the leadership is really key and critical. So you've obviously jumped on that quite quickly. Okay, good, all right. So let's look at kind of moving that slightly forward then. So let's look at, obviously, a lot of force change, as you say, incredible agility and speed with what technology has enabled very quickly. So what do you think from those sort of changes you've got in place now? And obviously we're thinking there's going to be a staged return at some point, and some of your thoughts on that, I guess, as well. But what level do you think people, your employees, want to see of what you've got in place already? How do you see that panning out?
Yeah, and do you know, it differs by the work people do, the sort of personality they are, and what infrastructure they have around them at home as well. So, you know, it's another one of these things where actually really you can have some principles, but you need to take it down to an individual level. And again, the role of the leader is key. So we've introduced some guidelines for people called smart working, which you know, is our response to what we've learned from having people working remotely. And what we're really trying to say to people is, right, work, you know, currently work is largely done at home where it can be. Once we can roam freely again and interact with humans, actually work should be done where it produces the best outcome, you know, for the customer, for the organization, and for the individual, which is, you know, actually quite a complex sort of set of interactions. And it's not just about the job, it's about the work you're doing within that job. So for example, some of my work, if I'm writing a board paper or I'm reading emails, does it really make any difference whether I'm sitting here in Thames Ditton or whether I'm sitting surrounded by lots of people and actually using up space in London? But if I want to collaborate with people about what our values should be in Aviva, or think about how we should approach our leadership framework, and, you know, it needs a number of people to think about things and to iterate and build on each other's ideas, I think that's better done in a room full of people. And, you know, there have been occasions where I've been on calls with people in my team and just said to them, I just wish I was in a room with you with a flip chart and some post-it notes, because we all know what we've got in our head, but we're not able to get it, to get it down on something that's visual that both of us can share. And I mean, there are some great technologies that do that, but you miss some of the signals in the room. You miss the sort of the person who's a bit reflective and maybe just take some time to come forwards with ideas. So I think the people who work for Aviva, there are lots of them who are going, this is great. I am very happy being able to work from home because I have a great setup. My work can be done here. It's I'm the customers I'm dealing with, internal or external, having a great experience. And I go, okay, fabulous. But there will be bits of your job that are probably better done in an environment that's, about collaboration and being with other people. And actually, we need people to stay connected to the organisation. You want people to remember what being part of Aviva feels like. And whilst we've done a great job of taking our wellbeing programs virtually and our learning programs virtually, I worry a little bit about people who are either early on in their career or early on in a new job, that's sitting next to somebody and them saying, well, let me just show you how I do it, or asking, how are you getting on with that? Or, come and, I know you can join the meeting virtually, but come and join me and watch me. We're losing some of that kind of richness of how people learn, because learning on the job actually is where most people learn, not from a course, whether it's virtual or in a classroom. And I think it's more difficult to do that in this sort of two-dimensional world.
So yeah, and I think I accept that. I think most people would. It is difficult. So we don't know how long this is going to go for, which is the biggest problem we've all got, isn't it? This unknown. So have you kind of just not quite thought about that yet, or are you just starting to think about how you might tackle that if it carries on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that we use Teams, which is the technology we tend to use in Aviva, actually people have got really good at using Teams effectively with zipping off into breakout rooms and having, I think you need smaller groups for breakouts for brainstorming if you're doing it in this format. It's 12 people on a call is almost impossible, whereas 3 or 4 actually does work. Interestingly, we did with the Exco, the Aviva Exco, we did a workshop earlier this week, and we used sort of virtual whiteboard technology, which worked really well. And what I noticed was, and everything you do, there are great ways of doing some things and great ways of doing other, right? We're the Aviva Exco, we're a bunch of quite opinionated, outgoing, feisty individuals who, enjoy getting stuck into things. So we obviously have been in rooms together, and when we're in rooms together, it can be quite, high energy. What I noticed was, what we're probably not so good at is when you're in a group environment, working on your own and focusing on something individually, and then looking at everybody's output as a full picture, because we tend to sort of pollute each other's ideas because we can't stop chatting. Whereas actually in this environment, right, you go and work on that, and then we'll come back together. So that is really effective. The whole stopping the group think and actually getting 12, 13, 14 people's ideas separately and then going, okay, what does that tell us, is brilliant in this environment. But building on each other's ideas is definitely trickier. So we're using technology as best we can. I have to say that I am quite looking forward to getting back into a room with them all at some point.
Yeah, I think it's we miss those things that we no longer have at the moment, don't we? And it's yeah, I think in terms of some of the technology, as you say, and how, I mean, that's been incredible on the platform, and I agree that, and also there's lots of talk about, okay, actually we're virtual in a way. Some of the people who perhaps wouldn't have been in the meeting normally have been involved, which has been, so that's been a positive thing in terms of breaking down some of that hierarchy, I guess. So that's been a positive, but equally, yeah, you're right. This whole thing about there are stronger sometimes in meetings, stronger people in the room, and other people who haven't got the chance to communicate their ideas. So it's allowing that space, isn't it, and learning that. Yeah, okay. And sorry, go on.
Sure, I was going to say, one of the things that I noticed, so my sort of first month when I was in the office, the people who tended to be based in London, in the UK would quite often, if we had a team meeting, come to London for the team meeting, and therefore you've got 7-8 people in my team in a room, and then we've got people in Europe and Canada and Asia. They would be on the screen, and what I noticed was when we went into lockdown and everybody was on the screen, you heard the voices more equally. So we all had to learn the etiquette of, has everyone stopped talking? Can I speak now? I've got, how do I get in? Whereas previously, the people who were not in London were struggling to get us involved in the meeting. Actually, this has really leveled that playing field, and we've, like, carbon emissions have gone through the floor, which is, we've worked out that we all knew business travel wasn't glamorous. It's probably not nearly as necessary, nearly as frequently as we used to think it was either.
So, and just on that note, so just bear in mind, I know this is how long is a piece of string, but where are you in terms of your opening at the office? Obviously, we've got a lockdown for until December the 3rd at the moment. So, are you thinking past that, you're sort of allowing people back? How are you playing that with your, and again, how are you communicating that to your employees, and how's that working?
We were, so initially, sort of during the summer, we were saying to people, if you need to be in work, you can. If you can't work from home, if you need to be in work, you can. And for a few people, that was the work they were doing. But actually, what we were more worried about were people with mental well-being issues, or who didn't have the physical workspace or an environment where they felt safe at home. So, and we'd taken away the offer. I mean, God forbid, but if you're a victim of domestic abuse and your escape was going to work every day, I was really worried about the people we'd taken that away from. Or if you suffer terribly with loneliness and you live on your own and you've been told you have to stay at home. So we were very clear that the right thing to do, and again it comes back to this sort of risk-based decision, actually, if people aren't safe at home and you're weighing up their well-being, including the COVID risk, plus all the other things that I've just mentioned. So initially we opened the offices up to people who we felt would be safer at work for various reasons, and then as the guidelines started to relax, we said to people, look, our offices are COVID secure, we're open, you need to have an induction into how the offices work now, one-way systems, all that sort of stuff. So we were beginning to open the offices up more and saying to people, you're welcome to come in, we're open. Our capacity was dramatically reduced in order to make the offices COVID secure. And we were seeing more and more people coming in. And I think probably an indication of how people want to do it, which is they were coming in for maybe a day a week or a day every couple of weeks and just kind of checking in, getting a little, little hypodermic of Aviva. And then working from home again. But obviously with the latest lockdown, we're following the guidance, which is work from home if you possibly can. So we're back to a more restricted list. But I stand by that if somebody is not going to be safe working from home, then our offices are probably the best place for them.
No, I agree with all of that. Okay, yeah, and well-being is such a key issue here, and will continue to be, I think, even more so. Okay, let's move on to question 3 then. So 3 is, the opportunity side. What opportunities are you exploring from the learning? And I guess I had a quick look again at your, I talk about journey, destination around the idea of purpose for the business. Okay, and you've got some quite clear purpose, a purpose sort of statements here, which I think are strong. But just how do you think is that panning out for the organisation and your employees going forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've definitely, this sort of myth of, dare I say, some slightly more old-fashioned managers who thought that they only knew what people were doing because they could see them. So,
yeah,
we've lost the myth because people are working from home and our productivity has remained pretty stable and our customer service scores have actually gone up in some areas. and those leaders who perhaps were a bit anxious about whether or not people actually worked when they work from home are at home and working themselves and realizing that stuff still seems to be getting done. So there's this it's changing people's mindset about what is possible and where work can be done, you know, and back to this whole, but it needs to be in the place that produces the best outcome. And we don't have choice on location as much as we'd like to at the moment, but in the future we will. So you know, some of the things we're thoughtful about are, well, if offices are for collaboration and innovation, what should offices look like, and how much office space do you need? So, you know, first question. You know, let's be thoughtful about that, and make sure that you know, office space is a huge expense for companies. So why would you have empty buildings with sort of these battery desks of, you know, where people sit and do their emails? But people do need human connection, especially for things like, you know, collaborating, innovating, and those serendipitous moments that make you feel that you belong to something special are important. You know, I've got some people in my team who have homeworked anyway, and actually one of the great things that I've seen through the whole lockdown and pandemic is people using our social media internally to share ideas. So for example, David is one of the people in my team who's been home working and managed his team remotely for a long time, just sharing ideas on how he does it and tips. And then another colleague who, you know, when the schools were closed, a colleague who happened to have chosen to homeschool his children, sharing tips on Yammer about homeschooling and what the difference is between, you know, being in school and being homeschooled. And, you know, I think encouraged the thousands of our parents who were probably tearing their hair out to just give themselves a break and say, you just need to create an environment where people can learn. We've pushed loads of our learning virtually, as I've said, things like our global graduate program, which we kicked off in September, October. The months all blend, don't they? I look at the number of speakers that we had at the launch of the graduate program, and previously we probably would have assumed it had to be face to face, and I think there's a good chance we wouldn't have had all those leaders come together and do it. But actually, the group chief exec did, the CRO did, you know, lots of fantastic people from across Aviva, and they didn't even have to give themselves, you know, 10 minutes to go up and down in a lift to get there. They just turned on their screen and turned up. So there is something very efficient about being able to work in this way and being able to work remotely. But I would love to be able to blend that with graduates actually meeting each other and saying, how are you getting on with that? And you know, the sort of the human side as well. So it's a balance for sure.
Yeah, I think, and that's coming through. I think this blended, all the learning is going to turn into this blended approach in terms of, as you rightly say, what's right for the business, what's right for the individual, and it will come to you know, bit of a choice, you know, scenario in terms of what that balance might look like in or at the office. So I can see that. And just from the organisation point, you know, I mean, I did see lots of your community investment. I mean, there's, like I said, about the purpose. There's some really strong, you know, things that I read there. 16 million, you know, and 1.2 million people supported in 2019. There's some fantastic things there. So, which is great to see. So I guess, you know, we were talking the other day with someone, and obviously we were talking about companies coming through this in a stronger way than those with that purpose to start with. Any other sort of things you're doing in that space?
I mean, we during lockdown we made a donation to the Red Cross, I think just in recognition of, they're one of our partners anyway, and in recognition of the fantastic job they were and still continue to do during a global pandemic. And then, you know, back to the letting our people who were healthcare professionals go back to the health service. And we had, you know, again, just small things that some of our teams did. So we had some, you know, sort of masks and gloves in various sites, and we had spare capacity, so we pulled them together and gave them to, you know, local hospitals. I think Aviva has a sort of a real strong sense of the fact that it sits as part of the community. So as you said, we have the Aviva Foundation, and we have the Aviva Community Fund, and we continue to donate to causes that we think are, you know, are really important to society. So it's, you know, it's great to see.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I thought, like I said, I thought it was some really nice, because I think everyone needs this kind of purpose. And I just think I don't know when this was all put in place. I don't know if that was before your time, but there's some, it just touches the right notes, I think, in terms of why we're all here. We're all, someone might look at working for an insurance company as kind of like, well, where's the purpose in that? But actually, you've got some really, really strong ideas around that.
Yeah, and I mean, with you today for a better tomorrow is just a lovely purpose, and it describes what insurance is about, doesn't it? You know, and obviously we're a composite insurer, so we do the full sort of general insurance, life insurance, pension, savings. But you know, I've previously worked in banking as well, and I think it's important in financial services to remember that some of what we do is a utility that society needs, and therefore we have a responsibility to do it really well, and enable as many people as possible to access our products and encourage them and give them the education and provide simple propositions so that people can get the sort of protection they need to live their lives worry-free, because no one knows they need insurance or a pension, or, you know, until they want to claim on it, and that's too late to get it.
That's good. I'm going to just go back slightly. I wanted to just, I know this is sort of out of sync slightly, but we talked quickly about the managers and some of those managers being working from home remotely, and that trust of people allowing, you know, their employees to get the job done. Where are you with performance management and you know, and that kind of managing that, you know, because that's an interesting one that technology seems to be hopefully sorting out, really.
Yeah, so my previous organisation, Metro Bank, interestingly, the team there were very keen on us using the technology we had more for our conversations and, you know, managing performance. I think you need to use technology kind of advisedly in the appraisals, reviews, performance discussions space, because it's the conversation that really matters and adds the value. And some of these systems now are so sophisticated that, you know, if you're my boss, I can fill out my details and transmit it to you through the system, and then tell you what I think my rating should be, if that's your ethos in the organization. And then you fill out your notes and put your, and then send it back. And actually, we never I've seen systems in organizations where we never actually have the conversation, which you and I know is what matters more than the rating, the paperwork, anything else. Just, you know, me understanding, how am I doing? How does it align to what the organization needs? What support do I need from you? What more could I do? Where do I want to go in my career? You know, am I on track? That's the great conversation. And I think because of the remote working, the first question of the leader needs to ask is, how are you? Because they're not getting that, I can't even use my word now, they're not getting that support from people who they walk into the office and see. You know, I had a rubbish journey and my cat was sick, just an arm around a shoulder. So that is so important for leaders to do now, so important. So yes, you know, we use Workday. Workday's, from a technology perspective, is great at helping us capture goals, capture reviews. The manager can, you know, sign off the comments and all that sort of stuff. But I think we all need to remember that it's the conversation that matters.
No, I'm just thinking on the, you know, a lot of people, this project kind of route, you know, and being able to manage it as well in terms of how people trusting, you can see things. If you get the project done, you don't need to time manage, do you? So, okay. All right, let's go on to question 4 then, really. My goodness me, that's quick. So 4 really is about you, Danny. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're, senior HR leader in well, let's face it, incredible times. So how's it been for you? How have you coped? Yeah, what's your personal view to date?
Yeah, I was talking to one of my mentors earlier actually, and I I love HR. I love the breadth of the landscape and the fact that as a profession we have the most incredible impact on businesses. If you think about it, there are 30,000 people in Aviva. If me and my team can provide great interventions and help people be better leaders, and clarity and learning and development, and all of that rolls up to helping everybody be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10% better at their job. Imagine what that produces for customers, for shareholders. I find that incredibly energizing. So even working in this way, I'm still excited about what we can do. It's just more difficult for me to see not the output of it, but how it's being used by our people. That's one of the challenges. I have found working in this way, everyone I speak to seems to be they've never been so busy. So everyone seems to be doing more work. So there's something about this way of working that feels efficient, but I'm not sure it's always terribly effective, because you tend to have, right, I need to have a conversation with 2 people about something, and you book in half an hour on one subject, which feels efficient, but I don't think it's terribly effective, because then I need another conversation in the next half hour with 2 other people about something else. Whereas in the office, probably, oh, look, the 3 of us could just sort this. Actually, I'm just thinking, what about, I think part of the increase in volume is because it feels efficient, but it's not as effective as we think it is. And we're missing all those, little moments where we can just kind of make the magic happen.
Danny, is there also sorry, Danny, is there also that worry of burnout, isn't it? That all this, you have to be seen, in a funny way in this virtual world?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are 2 different things happening in organizations. I think people whose work, and this is, I'm not thinking about people who are out in, banks and shops, still working on the front line and doing an amazing job. But people who are working from home, if their job is dictated by the hours they do, so if you are on the phone to customers between 9 and 5 and you have an hour for lunch and you have 15 minutes either side, we've taken away your commute. As long as you've got a great environment, you're happy being at home, I think it feels okay. Sometimes you might wish that your coach was sitting next to you rather than listening in remotely and then giving you feedback afterwards, but it probably feels okay. And I don't think the volume of work has changed dramatically, because your work is dictated by your hours. But I think people in sort of leadership jobs, specialist roles, support functions, probably in slightly more senior, and very senior leadership jobs, we're trying to manage everything we used to manage. We're managing it in a different way. We're trying to go faster, and we're responding to COVID. So you have to be more agile. And I think there's a bunch of leaders, across organizations globally, who are getting really tired, because you can't sprint forever. And one of the things we're talking about at Aviva at the moment is, how do we just help people to think about sensible things to do, like take a lunch hour. Please take a lunch hour. You will be better in the afternoon if you have an hour and get some daylight. Default meeting times, instead of being 30 and 60 minutes, make them 25 and 50. You'll get the same stuff done. You'll get 10 minutes. You might even get to go to the loo and make a cup of tea between meetings and just kind of, let your head clear. So I do worry a bit about how fast and hard people are running, especially as some of the joy that they got outside work and inside work has been taken away from them. But I mean, that applies for everybody. So I'm definitely thoughtful about it, and we're looking at, how we just sprinkle some of that joy back into people's lives in Aviva, just little, moments of thoughtful kind of interventions, and just people remembering they're supported. Yeah, and then I personally, lots of exercise. Been doing lots of exercise. In the summer, I did so much walking when we were on lockdown. It's not quite as glorious a thought now at 7 o'clock on a sort of wet, drizzly night. But I got through a pair of trainers in the summer. Literally, I mean, I was pounding the streets. And one of the reasons I did that is we've lost the boundaries between work and home, and I hadn't realised the extent to which my commute, stressful as it might have felt, was a fantastic way to decompress. And one evening I was up here, and you're talking to people and dealing with stuff and making decisions, and I walked down into the kitchen, and it was like coming up, being in the motorway and doing 70 miles an hour and coming up behind a stationary vehicle. And I walked into the kitchen, went, right, so how's everybody's day been, and what are we doing? And bear in mind, the children at that point weren't allowed to be in school because schools were shut as well. And they all sort of looked at me in horror. And, from my perspective, I was like, why is everyone in slow motion? And from their perspective, they were going, who is this crazy woman talking at 50 million miles an hour? And at that point, I realized I had to maybe just take a walk or go do something between ending my day and kind of, zooming down into the kitchen, and just try and get that boundary is really important.
Yeah, I think anyone just taking some time out, so whatever you need to do is just so important, isn't it? And equally, is as much as you don't want to keep it's thinking time. I'm the same. I do quite a lot of exercise, and it just gives you some thinking time outside of the norm, doesn't it? But and just so obviously when this all happened, which is obviously we're talking back in March when it pretty much in the UK, it must have been for you personally, it must have been quite some challenge. I mean, how did that, not, we're all fallible, so it must be kind of like, whoa, how did you get through that really?
There's a bit of, we're all in it together. I early on, I ended up having, Zoom calls with friends at the weekend, and I soon stopped doing that because I realized that actually that wasn't particularly helpful for someone who's doing this all day. Now, some of my friends don't work, and for them it was different, but I found I was dialing in and just sort of thinking, oh, this is great, I don't actually have to talk, I can just I thought that's probably I spent a lot more time with my children, who seemed to start tolerating me a lot more because they couldn't see anyone else, which was great. And actually, my eldest daughter, who's just gone off to university, she and I, she had a pretty glum summer because she couldn't do her A-levels and was worried about what that meant for her university. I had some lovely time, with her. Colleagues at Aviva have been brilliant about just, I go back to the beginning of the conversation we had, just collaborating and finding a way through this to make sure that we support the organisation. And, I really, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I really get my energy from the fact that I know we're doing good stuff to help our people. And can you at the end of the day look in the mirror and go, I'm proud of what we did today. We did a good job. We got people home and saved lives, or we got people back into the health service, or, we donated some stuff that's going to make a really big difference. Or we did a great, leadership guide on leading remotely, or, we've now got chair yoga lessons, or, just I see progress and positive impact. And that that for me, that really, really helps.
That's great, Danny. I think, at the end of the day, it's what everyone said. HR, this is what you were trained for, is kind of one of the things, a real people challenge that we've had. And I think HR has, certainly risen massively. I think, as you rightly say, 30,000 people you're responsible for. The amount of people I speak to and the numbers involved, it's immense, and doing a terrific job. So, yeah, well done for your hard work. Right. Listen, we're going to finish now, so just bear with me a second. So, Listen, thanks everyone for joining us this time. We'll catch up with another senior HR leader soon, and we'll find out how they're tackling the challenges and looking forward for the positive future as we look at it. So, Danny, thank you very much for your time today.